Captain Mustafa was checking his crews one by one and trying to make up for their deficiencies, because it was going to be a very long journey. During this journey, dangers could be encountered. So he wanted his crews to be prepared for these dangers. The preparations were finally completed and it was time to set off. They were loaded with cargoes to be taken by ship, waiting for the owner of the cargo. But he wasn't around yet. The time of departure of the ship was approaching, and the owner had not yet arrived. Captain Mustafa was uneasy because of the situation, and he sat down and got up. The proprietor finally appeared, but it seemed as if something was wrong. His top was torn off, and he was looking around nervously. Although there was no one in sight, he was pointing to places with his hands and saying, "Get out of my way, what have I done to you?" As he did so, he would moan as if someone was hitting him. That man's state seemed to be more than uneasy. So all the crew, including the captain, came down from the ship and went to the man. Captain Mustafa approached the man and said to him, "Mr. Salim, what happened? What the hell is wrong with you?" Salim Bey only looked at Captain Mustafa meaninglessly and began to struggle on the ground. As he struggled on the ground, he again began to act as if someone was hitting him. In addition, there was blood coming from his mouth and nose. Captain Mustafa and his crews were at a loss as to what to do when they saw the man like that, and they looked at each other's faces. After staring at him for a while, Captain Mustafa said angrily, "Come to yourself, don't you see that the man is sick? So we have to take him to the hospital right away," he said, and his crews grabbed the man's arm and took him to the hospital. At the end of the examination, the doctor said that he had nothing and that he was fine. I wonder why Mr. Sinan behaved like that. Or did he attempt to avoid giving money? If so, what was the blood coming from his mouth and nose? With these thoughts in mind, they took the man out and waited for him to come to his senses. When he came to his senses, Captain Mustafa said, "Mr. Salim, what happened? As soon as you saw us, why did you throw yourself on the ground and start struggling?" he asked. Salim Bey looked at them, looked at them, looked at them, and then said to them, "Get out of here, get out of here. Go away," he said incoherently. Captain Mustafa, in the face of the man's attitude, thought that he was acting in such a way to avoid giving money, and said to him, "Mr. Salim, if you are acting like this in order not to give money, know that I and my crews do not need the money you will give," he said angrily. Salim Bey, again looking at them meaninglessly, said, "What's the matter? Leave me and get out of here. If you don't go, your life is in danger," he said quietly. Captain Mustafa, thoroughly intrigued by his attitude, said, "Mr. Salim, what danger are you talking about? Tell me now, what's your problem? Or is someone scaring you?" Salim Bey said quietly, "They," he said nervously. "Who are they? Who is trying to scare you?" said Captain Mustafa. "They are here and they are watching us right now," Mr. Salim said. Captain Mustafa and his men stood up and searched after his speech, but there was no human or animal to be seen. The captain, who was very angry at this situation, approached the man, grabbed his collar and shook him violently. Then he said to her, "Are you kidding us, man? There's no one around, and yet you say they're watching us," he said angrily. "No, I'm not making fun of you," Salim Bey said. "They are now surrounding us, watching us," he said with a cowardly expression. These conversations between them took place at night, and it was pitch black. Even though it was July, they could feel a cold wind blowing around their necks. They began to hear howling and laughter following this wind. Salim Bey became very uneasy about this situation and said to them, "Didn't I tell you to get out of here? Now you too are in danger," he said, feared. Captain Mustafa and his crew, after hearing the humming and laughter, huddled at each other and crouched on the ground out of fear. As soon as they crouched on the ground, black smoky beings came out and started screaming. Those beings were looking at Mr. Sinan and saying, "You are ours, no one can take you away from us," and they were trying to scare him. While they were crouching on the ground in fear and at a loss as to what to do, they heard a voice in the distance. This voice was the voice of the Quran, and it was read aloud. When those beings heard the sound of the Quran, they covered their ears and began to run away, and after a short time they disappeared. As if all this didn't happen. What was Salim Bey afraid of? What were those beings, and who was reciting the Holy Quran from afar? While Captain Mustafa and his crews were having these thoughts, an old man of medium height, with a short beard and a white beard appeared. The old man drew a circle around them and said, "What you see around you may frighten you. They may even try any way to get you out of this apartment. So no matter what, don't go out of this apartment," he said, and walked out of the apartment. As soon as that old man came out, those beings began to appear again, and more violently. The old man took something out of his bag and put it out there. He mixed them together and burned them. Then he began to recite aloud Surah Falaq and Surah Nas. As he read, it was shaking everywhere, as if an earthquake was happening. At one point, the people in the circle were frightened and tried to run away, but the old man gestured with his hand and made them sit down. At one point, the old man stopped reading and stepped forward. After taking a few steps, he said in a terrible voice, he said, "What do you want from these sons of Adam?" At his attitude, one of the black smoke-like beings stepped forward and said to the old man, "Leave him to us," he said, pointing to Salim Bey. The old man asked the black being again in a horrible voice, "What do you want from this man?" "Black entity. He killed one of our sons. That's why we want his life," she said in a voice that made hearts tremble. When Salim Bey heard the black presence, he was completely ecstatic and fainted on the spot. The old man continued to talk to the black being, trying to persuade him. He looked at her angrily. "If you don't let him go, I'll burn you to ashes," he said. In the face of this threat, the black being walked over to the old man without saying anything. Seeing him coming upon him, the old man recited the Ayatollah one after the other and blew on those beings. Those beings started screaming after the Ayatollah Kursi was read. The old man read as he read, and the black beings screamed. They continued in this way until the morning prayer. From the moment the morning prayer was recited, they all disappeared. The old man asked those in the circle to come out after the morning prayer. When they came out, the old man sat down next to Salim Bey, who was lying unconscious on the ground. He recited Surah Falaq and Surah Al-Nas and blew on it. Immediately after this reading, Salim Bey came to his senses. When he came to himself, the old man said, "Son, tell me now, what have you done that those evil beings have haunted you?" he said to Salim Bey. Mr. Salim, in response to this question, "I don't know, uncle. I was just looking for a place to relieve my grief when I came here. At the end of this search, I saw an empty well and I made my pilgrimage there, and that was it." The old man, after listening to Salim Bey, said to him, "Son, don't you know that empty wells and houses are their homes?" And then he told him, "When you went into that well, you came across one of them and killed him. They have gone after you to take revenge." Captain Mustafa, after listening to the old man, said to him, "Uncle, why did they haunt us?" said the old man. He said, "Son, when you and your crews wanted to help him, they got very angry and haunt you too." "Uncle, what if they haunt us again?" said Salim Bey. The old man patted Salim Bey on the back and said, "Son, don't be afraid of them anymore. When they did not stop haunting you, I had to burn them," and then said, "Burning them to death is like killing a person. This is a sin in the sight of Allah," he said sadly. Then he said to them, "May Allah forgive us all for this situation," and he stood up and walked away. When he left, Salim Bey, Captain Mustafa and their crews gratefully looked after him. Where and why did the old man come from? Why did he help them? Was he human, or did he come from the outside? They wouldn't know that for the rest of their lives.